Namaste Narasimhaya. Namaste Narasimhaya. Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
I heard somebody who have senior devotees will give class. You will give class?
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Balaba Giribadhari Jaya Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Panachari So we're continuing the glories of the epic, miraculous story of our spiritual master, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. As I said, we're very comfortable in his presence. The Swami sat among us. There was no Vyasa-san yet. We used to like to go on morning walks. There were two things besides the wisdom and the sweetness and the kindness and the flexibility and the mercy that he gave us, but oh, he just sat amongst us. We were like his children. But then we liked to go on morning walks with him. And there were two things that concluded my love for him. On a morning walk, there were some ducks. And even then, there was one audacious devotee. And he said, "Get out of the way, the Swami's coming." I'm thinking, these ducks were here first. It's their habitat. Get out of the way, the Swami's coming. They were woken up 6 in the morning. Swamiji looks over. As you were thinking they are disturbing us, they are thinking we are disturbing them. Wow. He can see into the hearts of every living entity. And then I really fell in love with him. And the other thing was when he was so unself-conscious, sometimes he would just go like that while he was speaking, or go like that, and I thought, he's so comfortable. And so I was falling in love. And as I said, he was on the altar, but now I told you the story of Lord Jagannath. There was also a little Kartamashi, Krishna like this. It means little boss. And he was in a store on Hay Street, and I'd go every day and say, please can we have Kartamashi? Please can we have Krishna? And so the man said no every day, but then, and he was in the window, and then he was out of the window, so I went in, where's Krishna? He said, okay, we decided you can have your Krishna, but $35. Yes. So, again, Chaitra Guru comes into my consciousness, and I go out in the street and I said, my father's in jail. I need some money. I said, my best friend's in jail. I need some money. My little blue son's in jail. I need some money. $35 came. He was pale. We fed him. Jivananda and I. We took him for a walk in the park. We showed Prabhupada the before and after pictures. He said, just see. Now he was in home. So now we put little Kartamashi on the altar and Lord Jagannath. And so Prabhupada now said, there's a seat. He was teaching us the Parampara system. There's a seat, and it goes way back to Veda Vyas, and he's spoon-feeding us again. And so now, Samarshanda made a seat. Well, now many people were coming to the temple. All the hippie beatniks were coming. But also now the East Indian community were coming. And other people were coming. We had this Mr. Matthews who wore a suit, and he'd come. So Prabhupada was on the Vyasasana. And Govinda Dasi's father and mother come to visit her. And they were from Texas. And Texas was the biggest state in the United States, but then Alaska came along. But people from Texas, they're very rich, a lot, oil, so they really thought they're better than other people. Texas was big, we're big. So, I told you that this morning about how I went next door and confronted the Hells Angels. And so now again, the kirtan, long kirtans, was over and the Swami was about to speak. So without any respect, Govinda Dasi's mother and father go right up to the Vyasasana. And Govinda Dasi's father says, why does my daughter have to have an Indian name? He thought all Indians were the same, East Indians and Cherokees and Apaches. And why does my daughter have to have an Indian name? Well, the Patels of the Gujarat come. They want to hear the Swami's words, so they come too. So now Govinda Dasi's father's looking around. He felt like General Custer surrounded by the Indians. He's looking around. And they're just pressing, you know, in India, just a lot of people pressing. Now they're touching him. Not only that, the leader of the Patel clan had a gold tooth, and there was a light going on his gold tooth and hitting Govinda Dasi's father in the left eye. So this is making it even more unpalatable for him. And he's looking around. Why does my daughter have to have an Indian name? So Prabhupada says, you do not like Indians? He's very intelligent. Well, yeah, I like Indians all right, but why does my daughter have to have an Indian name? If she is happy, why do you object? He couldn't refute that argument. In Montreal, a man says, I don't think they should bow down to you. Immediately, Prabhupada says, as you are thinking they should not bow down to me, they are thinking you should bow down to me, and this is a democracy and majority rules. He was very fast. So now we're on another morning walk, and he takes his cane, and there's some bird feces, droppings. And he says, what's the meaning of this? Nobody knew. Upendra started blushing, saying, well, the positioning of the bird droppings are like tea leaves and we can divine it. No, what's the meaning of this? Sometimes he had to stop as Vishnu John said, what's that pink glow around the prasadam? Prabhupada said, just eat. So what's the meaning of these bird droppings? Nobody knew. It means that these bards have lived in this tree for 2 weeks. He counted them scientifically. We walk on. You see, even birds are attached to their apartments. So, it was very nice. He was spoon-feeding us Krishna consciousness. But he told me after this incident, and in a letter, that when you're successful, Maya attacks. This is the dynamic. So he had another hard stroke. And we were devastated. We went into the temple and chanted really hard for his healing. He moved out to Stinson Beach. But it was also another Rath Yatra festival. And so this time we went all the way through Golden Gate Park to the ocean. Unfortunately, someone had put LSD in the water. And so Jamuna and I and a few devotees started tripping, and Prabhupada was in Stinson Beach, and he said, where's Gurdas and Jamuna? And they said, well, they're a little not feeling so well. We figured it out, because before as a devotee, Timothy Leary himself introduced me to this psychotropic, but it's not nice when you don't choose to do something. And also, it wasn't because we wanted to be with the Swamiji, they all went to Stinson Beach. And so, everything was going on in San Francisco. Govinda Dasi Gorsunder made some paintings of the Prahlad story. I did the text. But now, Swamiji was sick, and he decided that he wanted to go back to Vrindavan. And so I did a photo, and you could see the plaintiveness of his face, that he was not sure if he'd ever see the temple again or see us again. And he even said in a evening talk, I may die at any moment, and we were devastated. He said, but I want you to start 108 temples. At that time, there was a devotee, Rabinda Swarup. He was an artist. It wasn't the one from Philadelphia. It was Rabinda Swarup, Roman numeral 1. And he was an ascetic poet artist. We didn't know any better. He was married to Halidor. Before Prabhupada told us, after the kirtan, many of us would go out in front of the temple, and there were dogs and cats there. And we said, why can't the dogs and cats come in the temple like St. Francis? And he said, well, they can't say, who am I? So there's a difference. He had to spoon feed us this. So now, and he used to pet the cats and dogs with his foot sometimes. Janaki's cat, and the dog Katha from Mexico that was given to me for a portrait being painted. And so, Rabinda Swarup, he's saying, I may die at any moment. And Rabinda Swarup, this ascetic, skinny artist, we hear him crying. And he crawls up. No, he's crying. And this was because we were philosophers, and we really were practicing what we wanted to know the truth. So his truth was, he didn't want any person as an intermediary between him and God, because so many priests misuse it. I saw, even in Vrindavan, the priest at Banki Bihari Temple was giving out all the sugar candy with his thumb on the pan so he could have the pan after everybody had the sugar candy. Pan is like it's like a betel nut, and it's sort of an intoxicant. So this is the point. He had his thumb on it. So Rabinda Swarup said, I don't want anybody to be an intermediary between me and God, not even you. He didn't say you. He was crying. Swamiji says, come here, my boy. He crawls on all fours. On the Vyasasana, he puts his head in Swamiji's lap, and Swamiji's petting him and say, dear, dear, my boy, I just want you to be happy. He crawls out, and he crawls out of the temple. It's like a theater play. Stage left, exit. There's Rabinda Swarup. Gone, our family. It was the first bloop, first person who left. Soon my dog Katha blooped as well. We were sad. We may never see the Swami again. But before he got sick, he said to Mukunda and Janaki and Saraswati and Malati and myself and Jamuna and Saraswati. Now Saraswati was born. My spiritual master wanted something started in London, and they went, the top sannyasis, in 1941, but they were not so successful. So I want you, 3 Grihastha couples, to go to London and see what you can do. Now we were getting an idea when he said, I want 108 temples. Suddenly we realized, well, this is a movement. Before it was just the Swamiji amongst us teaching us. But then he says 108 temples, and he's kicking us out of the nest. We didn't know if we'd see him again, but it was so nice just to be with him. And now we're not going to be with him. And the musicians that were influencing people were Bob Dylan and the Beatles. I had met Bob Dylan. I was in the civil rights movement with Martin Luther King, getting beaten, put in jail many times before I was a devotee. And I had a very nice conversation with Bob Dylan, Bobby Dylan, I call him. He wasn't famous yet. He was going with Joan Baez, the singer. They were dating, and she was really liking the political rhetoric. Of course, I had gone down south, all of that, but he was in the corner, and he was uneasy. And I went over, and I met him before, and he recognized me. And we came to the conclusion that we could reach people more with song and story than with politics, with political rhetoric. And he did it, and I did it. So now, the Swamiji went back to Vrindavan. Who? That's because I have two heads? Thank you. So we didn't know, it was different. Now the Swamiji wasn't teaching us, he wasn't feeding us, he wasn't showing us how to do everything. We marveled at him on the Vyasasana, drinking without touching, and he would eat gulab jamans or whatever, perfect arch and into his mouth. And when we tried to do it, the gulab jaman would bounce off our cheek. But he's back in beloved Vrindavan, and we heard his health is getting better. So our plan was, if we're going to London, we've got to meet the Beatles. Now, who would do this unless they had a strong belief system? Now we had a strong belief system. The Swamiji explained to me, and as he explained to it, I really got it. He said, at first there's the rules and regulations stage where you're learning, and this is a strong foundation. And you've all experienced this, and soon it becomes a part of you. And then there's the spontaneous stage of Krishna, of devotion. And when he said that, it was like a weight lifted off my shoulders. I realized now, this is a great adventure. Anything can happen. All gates are open. We can meet the Beatles. So, I was actually giving a talk in the temple, and it was about Prahlad, and suddenly Mukunda says, it's time to go to London. I had to excuse myself in the middle of the talk and rush to the airport. But we were going first to Montreal, because Swamiji was in Montreal. So we went there for encouragement, and there was also devotees there in Montreal. They took over a bowling alley where people bowl, and they made a temple of it. And there were blankets separating the rooms, and Himavati and Hansaduta were the hosts. And it was very nice in those days. We were really a family, and each devotee is precious. We're meeting new devotees, Bhardraj, Prajumna, Janardhan, new devotees in Montreal. I go for a morning japa walk, and somehow or other I reached, there was no address, we didn't know where the Swami was, we just knew he was in Montreal. On the way there, of course, the girls went first, and then we went in an airplane, Mukunda, Samarchand, and myself, and we had a whole jar of gulab jamans. They were bouncing up and down, and we said, let's see if we can eat like the Swamiji. So on the airplane, we were trying to do that. And we were actually intoxicated by the time they got to the Montreal border. And they were wondering, what are these, because it was the 60s, they actually had to test the Gulabjamans to see that it wasn't some kind of contraband. So we had the Gulabjamans, but the next morning on the Japa walk, somehow or other, by Krishna's mercy, I found Prabhupada's house. I saw a picture of Krishna. Oh, this must be Prabhupada. And I knocked on the door. Oh, Guru Das, what news? And I said, Swamiji, I just found this by psychic. He said, Krishna's mercy. Krishna's guiding us. And so we were meeting with him. And that's when I asked that, and I don't know why I asked it, but the first issue of Back to Godhead that was not mimeographed. Mimeographed is an ancient form of printing. Now it was a color Back to Godhead with Lord Nrsimha on the front. So for some reason, and I told you this already, can we wear Lord Nrsimha heads on Harinam? Yes. And to illustrate it, instead of something from the Shastra, he told about a Charles Chaplin movie, which he liked. Once we were on an airplane, and there's a Charlie Chaplin movie there, and all the devotees were like stoic and not looking at anything. And I always look to see what Swamiji's doing, because that's the practical application of Krishna consciousness. So I was always looking, what's he doing? And he was laughing at Charlie. Oh, so now it's all right. Now the stoic devotees can laugh. It's like when you go to the Jamuna River, you have 2 cups and do the oblations, and this man couldn't find his cups amongst all the other cups, so he put 2 clay balls in his cups, and he goes and does his prayer, and he comes back, and everybody put 2 clay balls in their cups because they thought it was the new spirituality. So that's what happens. People just sarble sing. So he says, and I'm going to use the Victorian language that he did, it's so beautiful. He said, Charles Chaplin was at the ball dance, and he had some tailing coats, and someone tore his tailing coats. And so Charles Chaplin went into the private room and saw his tailing coats were ripped, and he ripped his tailing coats all the way up to the neck. And then he went out to the ball dance, and he danced vigorously. And then everybody went into the private room and ripped their tailing coats up to the neck, because this was a new fashion. So this was his proof. Yes, you can wear a Lord Nrsimha head on Harinam, and then maybe everybody will do it. We never did it, but he said we could. He was always way transcendental. I told the story. I was on television in London with Prabhupada, and we're in a clinic in Bombay, and the doctor is saying, I saw you on television, and now you're in my clinic. Isn't it a small world? And Prabhupada said, yes, it's insignificant. He's transcendental. So it was really nice in Montreal. It was the first Janamastami. He gave us our sacred threads after 6 months, gave us the Gayatri mantra. And I was the photographer. I had so many pictures of Krishna on Janmastami, and he showed us how to do it. And the next day was Vyasa Puj, and he said, Guru Das, please speak something. And I was embarrassed and nervous, but I did from the heart. Later on in Vrindavan, sitting under the tamal tree, he had 7 so-called leaders speak. And the speakers before me I was feeling intimidated and inferior. They were quoting shlokas and everything. And then I spoke, and I spoke from my heart, but I really felt inadequate. Prabhupada calls me in afterwards and says, you have spoken so nicely, now I can retire. And he said Pishima liked it too, and she didn't speak English. I had a very nice relationship with Pishima, his sister, all nonverbal Krishna conscious communication. So now, on the way to London, Swamiji takes $50 out from someplace, like a magician, pulling a rabbit out of a hat. Where did he? Twice he did this. He gave me Lakshmi, but I don't know where he kept it. And we went to New York on the way, and it was nice to see the New York devotees. Now we only had $1,050. The 1,000 actually came from Samrashunda was arrested. He was, you'll read it in his book, but he was a somewhat notorious drug distributor, and he was arrested, and this $1,000 was given back to him. And actually his jail sentence and Upendra's jail sentence was shortened because we were Krishna devotees. Prabhupada said, do not worry, Krishna was in jail, but he will help you. And both the sentences were shortened. And then he was given this $1,000. So we had $1,050, but in Great Britain, they can be pretty stroppy, pretty conservative. And if you didn't have a return ticket and enough money, they wouldn't let you in. So again, we're being clever. And so, first Samashunda and Malati and little Saraswati went. Oh yeah, at one point in Montreal, Prabhupada picks Saraswati up with one hand and he said, they will say, what kind of sannyasi am I? He loved Saraswati, but he would also tease her sometimes. I'll tell you about that. So first they went. Okay, we have $1,050. Okay, come on in. Then they sent $1,045 after the bank took their cut to myself and Jamuna, and we were in Amsterdam, so then we got it. Okay, here's $1,045, okay, come on. And then we sent it to Mukunda and Janaki, okay, $1,040, come on. So we had two names. One was an Indian doctor, and we went there, and he let us stay in his house for a while. And the other name was a friend of Allen Ginsberg, the poet. He was a member of parliament. And this was good because a member of parliament is very influential. He actually turned out to be a very nice man. He was a poet. His name was Tom D Berg. We had the name, but we couldn't see him at first. So we were very bold. We were just bold. I don't know if you should do the things we did because they may not be spiritual per se. But we heard Tom Drieberg's in the hospital with an eye operation. And we had a little red pickup truck. Samashinda bought it, and it cranked. And you'll read in his book, one episode, it wouldn't start. Gurdas, go crank the truck, and I cranked it, and my dhoti got caught in the crank. Speaking of that, when we met the Beatles and George Harrison, they were in Apple, they were practicing, and the devotee was on the roof looking at the skylight, worshiping them instead of Krishna, and he fell through the skylight, and his dhoti got caught on the shard of the glass, and he lands at John Lennon's feet, didn't get hurt, in his Brahmin underwear. And John says, oh, one of yours, eh, George? Didn't miss a rip. Oh, one of yours, eh, George? One of your mates. So we had that little red pickup truck, and we go to see, now Tom D Berg, Member of Parliament, is in the hospital, is getting an eye exam. Okay, let's go there. So we go, the 7 of us, and we go to the bedside, and Jamuna says, "Oh, Mr. Drieberg, we've been wanting to meet you." She had this voice, as you know. The man starts shaking. He's shaking, and suddenly the thing by his bed, it's going up and down. Now it's flatline. Nurses are running in. They're reviving this man. He's shaking. Uh-oh, we blew it, you know. We're going to kill the Member of Parliament. We hear across the room, "I'm Mr. Drieberg." Oh, we go, "Oh, Mr. Drieberg, we've been wanting to meet you." We gave him tapes because he had an eye exam, so he had to listen to Krishna consciousness. He became our friend. Samashinda, such a visionary, brought a whole shipload of redwood from California because we knew someday we're going to get a temple. And when we got the Berry Place temple, he made the redwood. It looked like an upside down ship. It was beautiful. And we tried to soundproof it. Now at this time, I'm going a little bit out of the order, the chronology, but we were all living at John Lennon's estate. George said, now there's 30 devotees. We're 7, but we're attractive, so we all moved out to John Lennon's estate. Samashinda Tirthapada, they're building the temple. It's supposed to be soundproof. When we moved in, it wasn't zoned. There was contention that we could actually have a temple there. It was in the neighborhood. And there was a man right next door to the temple who said, we did kirtan 7 in the morning. He said, your music, I don't know what he called it, maybe your noise, goes through the door, through the wall, and my wife faints when she hears it. And my dog jumps up and down and goes, yip, yip. So, all the officials came to say whether we could do this or not. We had no chairs. We had to borrow chairs from the Theosophical Society, Annie Besant. So we borrowed some chairs. The man next door had the fencing champion of England, the Olympic man. He was the solicitor. And we had Lord Goodman. We had the Prime Minister, Mukunda. Said, let's get the Prime Ministers. He was very good. So they were contending, and he's saying the sound is going through the wall. My wife's fainting, the dog's going yip, yip, yip. So we were reading the Mahabharata, and we read that Yudhishthira's chariot never touched the ground because he'd never lied. And Krishna himself played a trick because there was Aswatthama the elephant on the other side, and there was also the Pandavas had Aswatthama the elephant, but the son of the other side, Duryodhana's side, had a real baby named Aswatthama. So Krishna said, Yudhishthira, you never lie. Just say Aswatthama the elephant is dead. So Yudhishthira said, Aswatthama, and at that point Krishna blows a conch shell. Aswatthama the is dead. They were devastated. It worked. So I thought, if Krishna can play this trick. Then I was reading, Krishna shifted into Abhimanyu to fool Yasoda. So if Krishna can do those kind of things, maybe we should do it. But I don't do this at home. And we did it, but it worked. So now that we're in the temple and the door is open, but there was a big window in the door. big window. And all the officials are there, 2 solicitors, and then there were some other people, and they're standing in the hall, and they're looking, and we're doing kirtan. And so, when the door was open, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, door closes. Mridanga's there, Gita-ta, Gita-ta, Gita-ta-ta. Door closes. They said, we can't even hear it in the hall. How can you say it's going through the wall and your wife is fainting and your dog's getting yip-yip? He said, it's a bloody trick. He tries to leave. The doorknob gets off in his hand. He's like a raccoon caught in the lights. He said, it's a bloody trick. He pries the door open. 35 sleeping bags fall out, and there's 2 people were only supposed to live there. But because George Harrison was our guarantor, and because they said we can't hear it in the hall, they okayed it. And so we got buried place. So we were living in the suburb, Herne Hill, but we wanted to go more central London. Samarshanda had his truck. We met the people from the underground newspaper, and they immediately took to us. They loved us, and we became part of the fabric of the London society, the underground society. Jamuna did a cover in Sanskrit, Hare Krishna Mahamantra. I did 2 issues with the Prahlad paintings and the text. They loved us. And then there was a place called the Arts Laboratory, where all the young people and people, the artists, gathered, and we did kirtan 3 times a week. And we recorded the Brahma Samhita prayers on just a little tape recorder. But we still hadn't met the Beatles. But we're really being accepted into the society. We tried to meet the Beatles. We sent them things. We found an apple at one gathering. It was an apple, it wound up and it walked, so we put the Mahamantra on it. Well, there was a demon there, Peter Asher, and he threw everything in the rubbish bin. We sent him the articles from the underground newspaper. He threw it in the rubbish bin. And the Beatles were soliciting. They wanted to hear ideas, but they got so inundated with so many self-made messiahs and ideas, and it was too much. So this guy didn't like us. He was throwing it in the rubbish bin. And so we brought an apple pie to his secretary, Chris O'Dell, and she was from America. And there's a saying, as American as apple pie. And it was steaming, and we were yogis. We wanted to eat it, but it had the Mahamantra. And she said, I'm going to get this to George. The next day, a few days before that, we get a phone call. Now, Samarshanda roomed with this person, Rock Scully, who was the manager of the Grateful Dead music group, and another manager, Danny Rifkin, were coming. And my old friend Ken Kesey, the author, he was my friend from the San Francisco days. And so Ken Kesey's coming, and the Hells Angels are coming. And are they going to be divisive or nice? They were nice in San Francisco, but as I said, I said, let's hire them as our security guards, and eventually it ended up where they killed somebody at Altamont and a concert. So the Hells Angels are coming, And they had weapons, and 2 girls too. And the girls carried guns and brass knuckles. It was before the security was that much, but they brought 2 motorcycles, 500 pounds apiece for a motorcycle. So here comes this contingent, 2 motorcycles. There was also an American Buddhist, And he was feeling out of place. I tried to make him comfortable. So there's the Buddhists and Kenkisi and the 2 Hells Angels and their girls and the 2 managers of Grateful Dead, and they come and they had no place to stay. Could we stay with you? So we, now by this time, the underground newspaper gave us a warehouse to live in, where they stored their newspapers. So, and on the top floor was the branch of Black Muslim, Malcolm X. You've heard of Malcolm X? Well, this was Michael X. And so, in Sam Mashinda's book, he said that we all went there. And because I was big, I was doing the talking. Well, I think if anybody saw Malati's face scowling at you, they'd leave, even if they're the Black Muslims. But it was just me. And I knew how to talk. I said, hey, brother, we're starting a temple. Could you find a crib somebody else? I talk black talk, Hey, brother, find a crib somebody else. Okay, cool. I actually got him out of jail. They planted some contraband, and I was the photographer, and there was babies all over, and I proved in court that they couldn't have found it so fast. So we were friends, but he moved. And so I was asking, a lot of times they said, Gurudas, you do the talking. So now we had the top floor, and I had a dark room there, and then we had a temple area, and then we had floors for Brahmachari and Jamuna and I, and Mukunda and Janaki, and Malati lived on the bottom floor in a refrigerator box, a big box. And we made like a little window, like kids make little houses out of paper. So we made a little window for her, and Sam Mashinda made a shower. And George Harrison later says, he was very funny, he did this Monty Python thing, and he said, I was so poor that I slept on the floor. Oh, you had a floor? So one of it is, I was so poor I slept in the box. Oh, you had a box? So we had a box. And some people were coming from the arts laboratory. We were chanting there. We were becoming well known as part of the fabric. So now Sam Mashinda, the Rock Scully, they were invited to meet the Beatles. We hadn't met them yet, but Chris O'Dell gave George the apple pie. So now Sam Mashinda goes to this big room, and John looks in, it's crowded, and the Hells Angels are there. And they say, we want to beat these Beatles up. Who do they think they are? So this room was full, and John's street smart. He looks in, I'm not going in this room. And Ringo just follows along. He was really sweet. He says, Gurudas, can I come back as a cat? Why, Ringo? I like cats. Okay. He was sweet. He just followed. Paul looks in. Oh, no, this is too much of a scene. I'm splitting. So then George looks in, and he sees Sam Mashinda in the corner, and he goes right to the corner. He says, I've been looking for you. And Sam Mashinda said, I've been looking for you. And the peace of the meeting diffused the Hells Angels wanting to do anything. It was such a peaceful, wonderful meeting. And George said, John and I have your happening record, and we chanted for 3 days in the car, and we couldn't stop. We finally had to stop. So he was prime. And so now he says, we've invited him to the temple. And he comes in a Rolls Royce, and he's wearing denim. When the Hells Angels came to our temple, that whole contingent, even Hells Angels get jet lag. And so I asked them to move their big boots. Please remove your boots. And we fed them sumptuously. And they fell asleep. Everybody fell asleep. After, we got a new film from Boston, the first film of the Swami walking on the street. And we thought, oh, what a great film. To the Hells Angels, there's an old man walking. Oh, look, we can see his eyes. He's sort of looking towards the camera. It's beautiful. They fell asleep. We could have taken all their weapons. Ken Kesey stayed up. He knew me. He said, why do you need a guru? So I gave the example, would you like to have a doctor that didn't read anything or didn't have any study? Oh, the appendix is on what side? Let's do some trial and error. So he got it. And he became a vegetarian, actually, for a while. I cooked for him. He stayed in England. So now, George came to our house, and then he said, now come to my house and do kirtan. And Billy Preston was there, the gospel singer, and he was really nice. And one of the Hells Angel girls now was Billy Preston's girlfriend. And George played the electric guitar, and Billy Preston played the organ, and we had a great kirtan. So now the people in the arts laboratory, because we were part of the fabric of the community, said we're going to have an event called the Alchemical Wedding. And the Alchemical Wedding is at Royal Albert Hall, the biggest concert hall, and we want you to come. And they invited all, actually in England, all the underground people knew each other. There was Miles, who had the metaphysical bookstore, and Hoppy, who did the visuals, the films, and you could get to know the Rolling Stones. They actually bought some marble floors for the temple eventually. It was more of a community, and people knew each other. And so this alchemical wedding was a gathering of the tribes, like in San Francisco. Now, John Lennon and Yoko were walking around in this covering, like this canvas bubble. That were actually, it was really funny to see the reporters interviewing the bubble. So, John's idea was, it's a Zen thing. We're there and not there. And then he said, it was his version of spirit, soul, and body, that if we're in the bubble, they won't know who's in there, and they'll hire us. They can't be prejudiced because they just see this bubble. He was intelligent in some ways. One time he said, Gurudas, everybody's wanting something from me, all my friends. And I said, your real friends will just give to you. And that was our philosophy. We were just going to give things to John and Yoko and George and Ringo and Paul. Just give, not take. Because this was something that affected them. And John was telling me this. And I said, John, your friends just would give to you, not take. And he said, like you, Gurudas? It's really sweet. Like you? And I said, yes. I said, your friends are like links of the chain, and now you've got the chain around you, and you're tightening it and you're polishing it. It's time to break that chain of unwanted friends, of unwanted things in your life. So I was giving him some spirituality. So now there was this alchemical wedding at Royal Albert Hall, and so he asked, they were in the bubble, but one time they asked myself and Jamuna a lot of times they asked us to receive awards. And this was at the Tate Gallery. Actually, there's a picture. They asked me and Samarashinda to receive an award. And there's a picture of David Bowie and Lulu and Dave Clark, all famous musicians, and they're all looking at the camera, and Gurudas is looking someplace else. I'm not even looking at the camera. I have to laugh at myself. Everybody's looking at the camera, and I'm someplace else. So they're in this bubble, and they say, Gurudas, we're going to the Tate Gallery, but we don't want to go, so would you and Jamuna get in the bubble? Well, for some reason I didn't. I would have done it immediately now. maybe because I was the temple president, I wanted to have a modicum of decorum, perhaps. I don't know why, I still don't know why. And Jamuna, I don't know why she didn't do it either. So, instead, there was a devotee, Suridas, and he's French-Algerian, and he has a very thick French accent. And Jyotila, his wife, was taller than him, and she had an Irish accent. So the reporter said it's definitely John and Yoko in the canvas bubble, but they thought his wife was John and he was Yoko. So now we get to this alchemical wedding, and we told them, if you invite us, oh yeah, the theme was silence, just silence. Okay, so this is the theme. So we get there, and we told them, you know, silence is also chanting. We might chant, but they said, you're such a part of the fabric of this community now that just come. And everybody was there, and John and Yoko were there in their canvas bubble, and the Hells Angels were there, and Ken Kesey, everybody was there. And there was a line that you weren't supposed to step over, some arbitrary rules, silence in the line. So like Lord Rishinga, instead of stepping over the line, we stepped on the line. But our plan was, we were in the wings. There was a theater in the round. So Malati was there with Saraswathi, with kartals. I had kartals. Matunga had Madunga. Sam Rashunda had this S-Raj. And we're just waiting for some sign. It was supposed to be silence. Somebody yells, "Strawberry Fields Forever." Somebody goes, "Oh," that's our sign. We start kirtan, coming down the aisles. The place erupts. It was supposed to be silent. We get on the line, and we didn't step over the line. Suddenly, a blues band cranks up. I go to the microphone. We're doing 12-bar blues Harinam. The place is jumping. It was great. There were rules we were breaking. No acoustics and no photography. And I'm not only playing the kartals, I'm snapping away. And there's Jamuna and Janaki, and I'm snapping away. And apparently, a woman got so excited that she took her clothes off. But she left her hat on. At any rate, I didn't see it, but I'm doing all these photographs. So then, and then after the place was just rousing, we left just at the right time. Leave them wanting more. We left, and I went to Fleet Street to get the photographs developed. I had a friend there, and they're looking with a big magnifying glass. Oh, there she is. And they found the girl. You really couldn't tell. It's like a blob of silver bromide. It wasn't very clear. But I had an article already. But now I said, you can't use it. Now I had to disassociate. But they had the pictures of Jamuna and Janaki chanting. So they wrote, "Mad Raven at Albert Hall." So I cut the girl out and cut the mad out and sent it to Prabhupada. Raven at Albert Hall. And it was. And the underground newspaper said, in their vegetarian loveliness, they changed the corporeal atmosphere into heaven. And so I shall continue the story tomorrow morning. Any questions? Do more. I'll do more. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Namaste. Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare